7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Blast off! Hello, hello! Welcome to Tomes and Tunes, episode, what are we at? Episode 16. I am your host, Arielle Silver, and I am very happy to have a fellow Los Angeles singer-songwriter as my guest today, Emily Zuzik, and we're gonna, as usual, talk about books and do a little song swap at the end. So, hi everybody. Let me know if you are here and where you're tuning in from, and put that in the comments so we can see you. And I'm gonna welcome Emily right now.
Hi, Arielle. How are you?
I am very good. How are you?
I'm hanging in there. You know, we're almost through this heat wave. We're still living in a pandemic, and homeschool virtual LAUSD has begun. So talk to me in a week.
Right. And half of California is on fire right now.
Yes, half is on fire. Yeah.
And just to top it off, it's an election year. So what more can you ask for?
That is so true.
Thank you so much for being here today, Emily.
Thank you for having me.
Cool to have you. Now you are not originally from California, is that right?
No.
You're an East Coast girl like me.
Right? I am. I grew up outside of Pittsburgh, and I did my college time in Syracuse, and then I did about a year and a half in New York, moved to San Francisco for 4.5 years, did a 3-month stint of touring through the Southwest and living outside of Austin, and then moved up to New York for the second tour of duty, which was 10 years at the end of 2001. And then moved out here going on 9 years ago.
Okay. So you and I were, I did something similar, lots of moving around, but I moved back to Boston after my first stint there at the end of 2001 as well.
Yeah, I think there was a mass migration both out of the East as well as back to the East, because there was this feeling before 9/11 happened around San Francisco, because the bottom had already fallen out of .com, which most of us were working in at the time, and you know, the rents were high, blah blah blah, no work, and everybody's like, I'm going to New York, there's energy there, there's jobs there, blah blah blah. And I was like, you felt like you were part of a movement. And then 9/11 happened, and then all of that talk disappeared around the Bay Area. And I was talking to a friend of mine, and I was like, I'm still going. They're like, no, this is the time to go to New York. And I think there was a little bit of romanticism about, like, maybe New York will return to the gritty 70s artist haven, you know. But I did go, and there was a lot more... Well, it was a different town, obviously, than when I had gone before 9/11, but not in all of the ways you would naturally think of. There was also there was a humility that was reinstated there. There was a lot more of a collective, you know, help your fellow man sort of thing going on, and that was good to be part of, obviously.
Yeah, that's a good point. New York did shift at that time.
I was Boston.
Boston, gosh, I was changing so much internally that, and my everything, I feel like I was in turmoil, and the world felt like it was in turmoil. But my perception of Boston, I don't think I was able to do a compare and contrast between pre 9/11, post 9/11, really. I think it was just me younger and me a little bit older, you know.
There's a lot of that happened for me as well. I mean, San Francisco was sort of my playground and escape from my first time in New York. It was exciting, but it was also overwhelming because I didn't have a clear direction on what I thought I wanted to do with my life. And I feel like when you're in New York and you don't have yourself kind of figured out, it can be really big and crushing sometimes. And so I ran away to San Francisco from all the expectations that I feel like either were placed upon me or that I placed upon myself, assuming, and became a kid and didn't feel pressure to have to get a career job. And I rode a bicycle, and I lived in the Mission, and I had friends who had these wild, wacky jobs where they'd, live under a desk for 3 months and then go 3 months hike around China, I never knew people like that before. So it kind of blew my mind, and it was where I needed to be at that moment. And then when I did get to New York the second time, I had a lot more focus about what I wanted to do, and the city made more sense to me. Yeah, it's also like 5.5 years later, you're pushing, you're in your mid-late 20s then, so you're a different person. You're at that like seminal 27, where people either die or, like what is the Jesus, Jimi Hendrix, Jim Morrison, Janis Joplin number,
Yeah,
So,
Amy Winehouse too, later.
Yeah. I don't even know if Jesus was that. I don't know why I clumped that one in there, but I feel like it's like all these seminal characters in storytelling and narratives all pass at that point. It's the what do they call that? It's not the Saturn return.
Yeah,
is it?
I'm not an expert on this at all, but I feel like.
But that's why we're talking
Saturn
our way
returns.
through it. That's what makes these crazy conversations fun, right?
I know. I do feel like the Saturn returns. I don't know. I remember hearing that, and I don't know if that is the same or different for the early 30s, if that's considered one big lump of time.
I know. There is that weird
30s
period from about 27 to 33 that like a lot happens.
Yeah.
Like massive shifts in personality. And I think the same thing happens when you hit 40. They seem to be big numbers that people ascribe a lot of transformation at.
Yeah. Well, yeah, these like moments in time when we start reckoning, like, what have I done? What do I want to do? Who am I and who do I want to be? And what will it take to get there? Or is that just an impossible thing? And so therefore I have to kind of let those hopes go or something like that.
Yeah, I think that is true.
You're making me think with New York.
Oh, what you got?
I have this book right here. Have you read any Joan Didion?
No, but I remember, was there a big doc that was out like in the last year about her that I might have seen? Because
did not see it, but I think, yes, there was.
I think I saw the documentary and I was like, I got to go back to all of these texts. And like, I didn't even know she was dialed in and her husband was dialed into all these other people who were like cultural makers. Or, you know.
Yeah, for sure. And she has an essay that that your whole New York thing reminds me of. It's called Goodbye to All That. And,
yes.
And it starts out, it's easy to see the beginnings of things and harder to see the ends. I can remember now with a clarity that makes the nerves in the back of my neck constrict when New York began for me, but I cannot lay my finger upon the moment it ended. And anyway, I wasn't planning on pulling that down, but I was like, oh my gosh, your experience with New York and I feel
San Francisco was the same way. Because I actually went back at a certain point of living in New York for a while, going like, could I move back here because it might be easier? I already had friends and I kind of understood the way the town worked, and it's such a smaller space geographically to kind of navigate. And I remember sitting, I was back to play a CD release party, so this must have been like 2006 or something. And I was sitting in Dolores Park at the top of the hill, and it was kind of vacant. There were people there, but it wasn't like a packed day. And it was really beautiful out, and I was looking over toward the bay, and I thought, this is really lovely, and I'm enjoying my time here, but I'm going back to New York. It was just something I knew in my soul, and it gave me a sense of peace because I'd been struggling with, do I stay in New York? Do I leave? Is San Francisco the right step? I knew that from trying out Austin that I wasn't ready to go there because Austin is such a slower pace than New York that if you're anywhere near New York's pace, like Austin feels like, oh man, I'm just going to sleep all day. No offense to anybody who's moved to Austin or lives there, because I think that town's great too, but I just knew for me it wouldn't work. So
I never lived, well, I lived in New York in second grade.
Okay.
That was the beginning.
That's
the end
legit.
of my time there. I went to second grade in New York. before I moved to Los Angeles, literally just before I moved to Los Angeles, it was November in 2006, and my then husband and had been the drummer in my band. We had been on tour together. We had recorded a few albums together, and I was this was the moment when I quit music, pretty much. Although it sort of lingered on, as Joan Didion says, like the end is harder. You know, kind of lingered on for a little while. But but at the end of 2006, I canceled the rest of the tour dates, and I said I'm not touring anymore. I'm done, and I turned to him and I said, well, you know, you're a drummer, you know, what do you want to do now that I'm not playing? And he said, well, I want to go to a music town, so let's go to New York. He was from Pennsylvania originally, and we had met in Boston and had toured across the US a couple times. And so great, we went to New York, and a friend like showed us around. And I mean, I was familiar with New York but had never really looked to live there, and so a friend took us around to different neighborhoods, and you know, we kind of explored. And then it was right around Thanksgiving, we went down to Florida to visit my dad for the holiday. And on our way down, my ex was like, you know what, I don't really feel New York. I don't think I want to go there. Let's go to Nashville instead. I was like, oh, fine, whatever. Nashville's fine. Like, I'm done with music, you know, for the foreseeable future, and wherever you want to go is fine. And he was like, well, Nashville is, you know, we can maybe afford to buy a house, and, you know, we have friends there, and you know, etc. I was like, great. So we got to Florida for Thanksgiving thinking that we would be moving to Nashville. By the end of the holiday, we had booked a 2-week, you know, essentially an Airbnb in Los Angeles, and left my dad's house in Florida.
What an interesting travel tale. Yeah.
And that was how I moved to Los Angeles. And then we split up a few years later, and he moved back east, and I had just fallen in love with LA by then. So
that's cool. Yeah, my husband and I met in New York, and he grew up out here. So, and his whole family is here. My family's back east, and at certain points in time have kind of been all over, because my brother had a job that had him down in Kentucky for many, many years, and my sister married a guy in the Coast Guard, so they were moving every 2 years. So there wasn't like a spot that felt like, oh, come back to, because where I grew up was very provincial, and I knew I wasn't going back. The day I left, like, I was like, nope, done. And so at the time, he was working in TV, and I was working in music and my side hustle of which was in the fashion industry, and it was sort of like, well, it's New York or LA, and we'd kind of come to the point where we weren't sure we wanted to stay in the city, because we wanted to try those things like buy a house, maybe have a family, and it just didn't seem financially possible. We'd considered moving up near Woodstock, because I have a lot of friends who have houses in like Susanville and New Paltz and Kingston, and that just felt like a lot of commitment to the train. And then we came out a couple times to LA, and I was like, I can do this. I mean, like, I like that LA is 2 hours from like 5 different geographies, and you can get to a lot of different places very quickly. I'd lived in California before, and you know, I struggle with it sometimes. I'm not the biggest fan of heat, so when we have these big swings, I'm sort of
another reason Austin didn't make the
for sure. But it's wet heat there, you know. I mean, it's been kind of like moist the last few days too, but. You know, it's not like Florida, you know, that's like big time humidity. But yeah, we ended up here, and it's an up and down thing for me. It wasn't, you know, New York was like, I got there and I was like, this is a town I'm going to live in, you know, and LA's been like this for me. It's, some days I'm like, I love it. And, you know, I look out my window right now and I look at a canyon that hopefully no developer will build houses on in the near future. And I think, I can watch this family of hawks that I watch. They have bred, and there's like 4 of them that fly around. And so I can just sit and watch them. And I'm like, this is so great. And I can walk my dog around here. And there's a lot of musicians who live on this hill, and that's very cool. And then there's other times where I just get down on it, like, oh, there's no connection, or everybody's so spread out, and, you know. But I mean, at this point, since we're in quarantine, a little bit of that has fallen to the wayside because we're all in our houses anyway. So we're connecting with our phones and streams like this. Yeah. And I've done a lot more connecting actually with people I've known since this has happened. Like, how are you guys doing? How's your family? What's going on? And that's good. I wish I probably did it more when we weren't all locked down. But, you know, you've got to give yourself some grace and recognize where you are in the moment that you're in it. And that's where I'm at. So
yeah, and I feel like there's always that question as an artist, someone who is creating something. There are a lot of obligations out in the world, and then there's the very wonderful thing about connecting with friends and community. And then where does the creative creation time happen? It's very easy to just let it get squeezed out. And so,
well, I'm lucky right now because I am in the promotion end of creativity, which is very left brain, right brain for me. Because when I'm in like songwriting and making a record, like I just don't even want to know what other people are doing. I don't want to know who if I'm smart enough, I'll start like a little folder and I'll be like, I have to get back to that. But since having finished a record and, finished that whole part of it, a lot more time has just been spent to like, I'm just going to focus on like, what do I have to do to make a noise about this that I'm very proud of and I'm throwing into the world in like a week or so. And that's almost like a big relief because that way I don't have to totally multitask. And it's, this is a weird time anyway. Like I'm multitasking, like trying to keep my kid on a day-long Zoom for her class or trying to coordinate with my husband, like who's here and when, and can you cover when I have this thing? Can you cover when I have this thing? And, it's challenging. It's been really challenging for everybody. And so to add on top of that, trying to be creative and trying to engage that part of your brain, it's a lot. That's the funny part about, you were mentioning how Shane said he had to like up his reading game whenever he did this. And I felt the same way whenever we started talking about it. But I'm so glad that I did because, and this is something I was thinking about talking about because it gets to the books.
Good segue then.
Yeah. I go in spurts of reading. This is how I've been my whole life. Like I'll go for a while and be like, book. And then I'll get like overwhelmed with some other project. And then it'll go months before I pick up, like I'll read magazines or the newspaper, but I don't always like commit to a book. And the last three, which I will show you right now, there is The Never Open Desert Diner by James Anderson, fiction. Radio Shangri-La, What I Discovered on My Accidental Journey to the Happiest Kingdom on Earth by Lisa Napoli, nonfiction. And Eleanor Rigby, Douglas Copeland, fiction. All of these books I found at random in my local lending library under the tree, like a few blocks away. I hadn't bought them intentionally. I just would check in on the box and go like, okay, like maybe I read the inside flap and go, that's where I want to do. But what I found really interesting about this whole thing was that there's some very telling isn't the word, but there are things about all three of these books that are very fitting to the age we are living in right now. In that there's a character, the lead, who has a very sort of closed off, very routine life that they're completely content with. It's not a full life. It's very small. And then some character comes in and kind of blows up the whole thing. And through that, there's like massive transformation. And I couldn't think of something more fitting to find during a global pandemic when we've been living in isolation and disconnected from people than to find these three books at random and to have such a connection with them. And they're all very different, but there were just bits of these things. And I was like, oh my God, I didn't even think about that. But as I was prepping for this, because I had only read these two, and then I went on a family trip and I read this in like 4 days. And I was like, oh my God, it's like this, it's not the same story, but these themes, and they're consistent with the themes that I hear so many people talking about right now, that I was like, woo. the universe is giving me these little gifts and I'm recognizing them. So I just thought that was kind of a cool thing. There were a couple of things here too. I have to find them.
There's a teacher writer that I know who says that there are only two stories ultimately. One is the protagonist, the lead character, is happy, and something happens that disrupts that person's happiness, and so the story is that person trying to get back to happiness. And then the second story is the protagonist is not happy, and then something happens and awakes them so that they start to strive toward happiness. And so the story is the journey.
The journey, the transformation. Right. And in some cases, for instance, these two main characters, and probably her to some extent, Lisa, who tells the story, they're all content. So is that happiness? Is it not happiness? It's something in the middle.
Right,
They're on the hamster wheel in a lot of ways.
They're not looking for change. They're fine.
Right. But then the change comes and it kind of shakes everything up. And I think in all three cases that don't all end in happy endings, they all do come out on the other side, like learning more about themselves, widening their world experience, and being at a happiness place. I don't, it's not like happiness, but it's something wiser, self-acceptance, acceptance of presence, like not trying to control everything, but like especially in this one, there's a tragedy at the end, and it's sad, and I felt really sad when I got to the end of the book. I was like, I don't want this to end. I want to know what happens to him. But this guy, having gone through everything he went through, is going to figure it out. You have this confidence where you didn't necessarily at the beginning. You're of course like, this guy's just sort of dropping off the planet, he's along with everybody else who lives in this desert on this lonely highway,
Yeah. Well, that idea of drawing on our past struggles and the ways that we have grown to help us through our current struggles, that's like at the beginning of this pandemic, I was talking to I felt like I was sort of having similar conversations with a lot of people where the friend would say that they felt prepared, or not mentally prepared, but they felt like they had some skill set that had developed out of a past struggle that had prepared them for this current time. That
I could see that. I mean, there's a lot of coping mechanisms that have come into play, during the last 4 or 5 months. Yeah, for sure. Or even just a meditation or a yoga practice, which I've come back to a lot more during this time, not necessarily because I was seeking enlightenment or whatnot or wanted to have physical fitness, but it has been a natural gravitation for me. And at the same time, it's helped me to be a bit more present and balanced when things are often shifting all the time. And you're like, oh, because I'm a creature of habit too. I think we all are.
Yeah.
And so I don't know,
So I have a question for you, going back to those three books. Was there a passage in any of them?
Yes, that was one of the things I was trying to. I have to figure out which one it is. I was reviewing them.
I love language, and I love the way that writers have, express something in their different voices. I remember Douglas Copeland. I went through a period of time. He is hysterical. I just remember.
Yes, he's so funny.
My ass off.
I know, and it's really dark, the laughing, because I'll catch myself laughing, and I try to explain it to my husband. He's like, that's kind of dark. I was like, I know, it's amazing. Let's see what, I mark them with like my nail here. Now that's just a description of like the way life was.
Have you ever written any songs inspired by
books?
Literature. Yeah.
Yes, I was going to bring that up, and that's why I'm playing the song I'm playing.
Oh.
I have a song on my next record called The Band Played On. Yeah. And it's a fictitious story that was kind of built around a character, a woman dealing with the end of a relationship and finding that space and post-relationship place. And in the second verse, she kind of goes into detail about this this lover. And there was a line in Just Kids by Patti Smith where during the era she was involved with Sam Shepard, and he was producing his play Cowboy Mouth. So I was like, oh, that's a great phrase, got to use that. And then since I took that from that book, I was like, well, let's make this guy, since it wouldn't be unfitting for the character she's describing to be basically built upon the idea of the Sam Shepard she describes in that period. And so that's where I went with it. And, I don't know if I got it right or not, but, it's also one of these universal tales, which, Patty lived this.
So you're saying that you wrote a song that was inspired by a book written by a songwriter, a section of that book that was inspired by a
playwright.
Right.
Yeah, it's very meta.
Love that. Love the way the arts are just like
so crazy. It all seemed strange and yet normal heart experience. Oh, I wish I was a better note taker.
Which book are you looking at? I'm
looking at Radio Shangri-La, and I just went through it. I'm looking for my notes here. Why can't I see them in here? Well, there was one bit at the very beginning, and this might have been it. The writer of the book had started going to this, I don't know if it was a spirituality or self-help class, and the teacher of the class had inspired, so he's like, I want you to keep a notebook by your bed, and every night before you go to sleep, I want you to review your day and make a short list of 3 things that happened that were good. And someone, or several, it says, what if 3 good things didn't happen? Several of us asked in unison. Clearly we weren't naturally wired with a positive way of looking at the world. Well, that's the point, he said. This exercise challenges you to find 3 good things in every day. They don't have to be big things. In fact, most of the time, they're not going to be big things. Big, important things don't happen to us every day. Winning an award, getting married, starting a new job, going on vacation. It's the big spaces of time in between those monumental events that make up life, right? The idea here is that little things have power. An interaction with someone in an elevator or a clerk in a store. Small victories, like fixing something that's been annoying you in the house. Going for a really long run. I want you to see that every single day, 3 good things do happen. It will help you discover that goodness exists all around us already. And I naturally was like, boom. But this book also reminds me a lot of Eat, Pray, Love, which came to me, as with a lot of people, was passed along by someone else. You should read this book, which she got this idea from someone, and then she did this big adventure, but someone said, oh, I got this book from someone else, but I think you would really dig this book. And I did, and I read it, and like everyone else who watches Oprah, but it's this self-exploration, challenging, looking at your life. And it hit at a seminal period in my life. There were big transitions happening at that point. I was not sure what I was doing next. I mean, I was doing music, but I was doing a lot of overseas touring, and I wasn't in New York a lot, but I had an apartment there, and I was sort of like, why am I paying for an apartment when I'm not there? And this coming back after several weeks to a stack of mail is stressing me out, and how long am I going to have these side jobs before they fire me? So there's a lot of stress, and there were things going on in my personal life that there was just a lot of stress, and not a lot of answers. And not that I was necessarily looking for answers, but I was in a lot of internal turmoil and was seeking. So I related to this Radio Shangri-La book in that same way, but it was interesting coming at it from a perspective of I feel like I got through that period by taking more charge of it, by dialing into program stuff, by doing whatever I needed to do to claw my way out of wherever I was.
Yeah.
And it was interesting to read this one because you're kind of watching almost like a bird's eye view. Like, I remember that. I remember when I was doing that. And I remember the first time that hit me with an aha moment. And, trying to keep that sentiment in your life, that presence in your life, is a challenge. It's a daily thing. It's kind of, you have to come back, and sometimes I get like, I gotta do this, and because I don't sleep well either, never have. It's like a Zuzik thing. But like in the middle of the night, I think it was like at 3:30 in the morning last night, and I was just like, and I was like, I'm like cricked up, my back hurts. It's like, and I was like, you don't have to do anything. You really don't. You think you do, but you need to breathe. And there's a certain amount of showing up you need to do, but you don't need to hit all those bullet points. And eventually, usually takes a half hour and a half, I go back to sleep. And I don't know, it's remembering those things, especially in the times when you're like, either with like anxiety or anger, or I have a hard time when I'm in the depressive sad phase remembering all that. I normally like put my family through like, terror for like a day where I'm like, I just can't get it together. I can't, I'm sorry. And eventually they just like ignore me enough that I get it together.
It's interesting that in this, when you were reading this book, you were thinking about your past self when you were reading Eat, Pray, Love, and it was like you've changed, you've transformed over time, and you were sort of seeing your younger self from the other side of the hill, I guess.
Yeah,
but there's also, challenges.
I think that's true. And the other thing is like this quarantine is new territory for every human being that's, like alive. And so while there is that looking back to that time with Eat, Pray, Love, there was also a moment of like, okay, we're in a very different time now. And there's a lot of unease among everyone. And there was some peace in reading her transition through that as it would apply to right now as well. So it wasn't a strictly looking backwards thing. There was a lot of backwards and a little bit of forwards too, which I think,
That's a good book.
Yeah. I mean,
like,
it's
kind of looking around at your life, like.
Yes,
From where
taking
you are.
stock, remembering things, remembering things, that's always the challenge, especially when you're up in the middle of the night and you remember things and you have these aha moments like, oh.
Have you started that practice that you just read that excerpt about, where you think at the
gratitude
end of the day
lists?
of the three
I
things?
have done them over the years. I haven't done them strictly. I try, usually when I'm down in it, I will try to get back to that and go like, okay, just think. And I do have a lot of those moments where like I want to freeze time, and they're not always like, I'm just like, my body naturally wants to get up because like I'm awake. It's 6:30 in the morning or whatever, but like just stay in the bed, like you're remembering, you're having moments. 'Cause pandemic, my daughter's been climbing into bed a lot, so I had this moment where I'm just like, I'm in bed. My daughter's there. My dog is at my feet. We're all in the king size bed. And, I'm like, the natural tendency is like, I want to get up. Maybe I can get some stuff done before like things have to go like go. And I was like, no, you know what? Just stay here. Because the thing is like, how many more years do I have when she's going to want to be near me before she goes away and then she comes back? I mean, you just, I'm old
She's,
enough
what,
to
7
know.
or something like that, right?
She's 8. And
8.
she's in a really great period. And it's like she's independent enough that it's not like baby neediness all the time. Yeah. But it's also, there's a window before like there's going to be that transition to teenhood where like kids naturally want more independence and they hate their parents. And it's going to be like rough for a couple years. It just happens, And just being aware of that and trying to be like, this isn't forever.
Yeah.
I'm never a person who goes like, oh, they grow up so fast. Like, I hate that sentiment because I'm like, I feel like it wants to keep people in a little jar. I want to celebrate each stage a person goes through, whether it's my kid or my friends. But in that, you have to be prepared for giving them the space to do that
Yeah.
and to not take it personally.
Yeah. And if it's any comfort at all, our 16-year-old climbed into bed last night and was just like, hanging out with us while we were like reading, and she was just like hanging out, and I was like, this is awesome.
Yeah, there's these moments where you're like, it's not like, oh, I can't sleep, but there's those moments too, but there's those moments like, this isn't gonna last forever, like life. And you got to grab those moments when you recognize them and just go like, just breathe this in. Just take it in, because where the goodness and the love and the warm fuzzies you're feeling right now are totally valid. And it's, you can maybe remember this when you're like on the opposite end of that emotional spectrum. But it's all a learning experience, right?
So many good things. Yeah, totally. Well, I mean, perhaps the purpose of our life is really to like learn.
I hope so. I don't think that's everyone's journey, unfortunately, but I keep trying to navigate a lot of that energy out of my way.
Totally. By the way, I just want to give a shout out to Mark from Dallas, Texas. Hey, Mark. And Wanda.
Hey, Mark.
I know that you would love Joan Didion, and I'm sure you're going nuts over this conversation about creativity and process and transformation, because I know, Wanda, that's your bag.
Well, I know you're also a yogi, so I figured you'd be into this kind of conversation too. Every yogi I know will talk transformation and spirituality, so that's a good thing.
I'm a sucker for good transformation. Hey, so I've been reading, this morning I taught I've been teaching these writing seminars for this organization this summer that I'm a part of, the International Women's Writing Guild. And
Cool.
I was looking at the first chapter of Tim O'Brien's The Things They Carried for today's seminar. And I thought I would bring it into this conversation as well.
Bring it.
Totally different conversation. But I actually made Darby like listen to me read aloud like until he fell asleep like half of this first chapter last night. I was like, I gotta read this to you. He was like, you've read this to me before. Like, I'm like, I know, and it won't be the last time, because it's just so great. So have you ever read this book, The Things They
No.
Carried?
I saw you post about it, and I'm very curious.
Yeah, so Tim O'Brien would say, or has said, that this is a work of fiction, but he himself is a Vietnam vet, and he has written about his experiences before, and there's a character in this book called Tim O'Brien.
Aha.
And so it has this very like
Very meta.
Very meta, fiction, nonfiction, where are the boundaries, and who knows, but the first chapter is The Things They Carried, and I couldn't possibly read the whole thing right here, right now, but I'm just going to read the beginning of it.
Please do.
I wish I could read like the first line of every paragraph. There's just so much here, but First Lieutenant Jimmy Cross carried letters from a girl named Martha, a junior at Mount Sebastian College in New Jersey. They were not love letters, but Lieutenant Cross was hoping, so he kept them folded in plastic at the bottom of his rucksack. In the late afternoon after a day's march, he would dig his foxhole, wash his hands under a canteen, unwrap the letters, hold them with the tips of his fingers, and spend the last hour of light pretending. He would imagine romantic camping trips into the White Mountains in New Hampshire. He would sometimes taste the envelope flaps, knowing her tongue had been there. More than anything, he wanted Martha to love him as he loved her, but the letters were mostly chatty, elusive on the matter of love. She was a virgin, he was almost sure. She was an English major at Mount Sebastian, and she wrote beautifully about her professors and roommates and midterm exams, about her respect for Chaucer and her great affection for Virginia Woolf. She often quoted lines of poetry. She never mentioned the war except to say, "Jimmy, take care of yourself." The letters weighed 4 ounces. They were signed Love Martha, but Lieutenant Cross understood that love was only a way of signing and did not mean what he sometimes pretended it meant. At dusk, he would carefully return the letters to his rucksack. Slowly, a bit distracted, he would get up and move among his men, checking the perimeter. Then at full dark, he would return to his hole and watch the night and wonder if Martha was a virgin. And as it goes on in the chapter, I'll just read the next line, next paragraph. The things they carried were largely determined by necessity. and then it starts to introduce characters and the things that they carried. And then further it says, let's see here. What they carried varied by mission, and then it kind of talks about that a little bit. And then the things they carried were determined to some extent by superstition, and then it talks about the things that they carried. And it starts to introduce the characters, and throughout this, you hear that Ted Lavender, if I can find him here, where's Ted? Ted Lavender, who was scared, carried tranquilizers until he was shot in the head outside the village in Tongkei in mid-April. And over the course of this chapter, Ted Lavender appears again and again, and until you see the scene in which he's killed. And as we were talking at the beginning of this conversation, Ted's death is sort of the thing that disrupts Lieutenant Cross from his love for Martha. At the end of the chapter, he says, no more fantasies, he told himself. Henceforth, when he thought about Martha, it would be only to think that she belonged elsewhere. He would shut down the daydreams. This was not Mount Sebastian. It was another world, where there were no pretty poems or midterm exams, a place where men died because of carelessness and gross stupidity. Kiowa was right. Boom down and you were dead, never partly dead. Briefly in the rain, Lieutenant Cross saw Martha's gray eyes gazing back at him. He understood. It was very sad, he thought. The things men carried inside, the things men did or felt they had to do. And it just goes on, and I just couldn't resist. I had to read a little portion of this. It's really
How far
powerful.
in are you?
Well, I've read the whole book, and because of the seminar today, I was just using the first chapter to talk about the thing that I wanted to talk about in the seminar. So I've just read the first chapter a few times over the last week. And I'm in the middle of a couple other books, and so I'm right here right now trying to decide, am I going to continue and read the rest of this book again right now, or am I going to turn myself back to the other books that I was reading before? So I don't know.
Do you think Tim Lavender is Tim O'Brien?
No, Tim
the
Lavender
writer?
dies. Yeah, Tim, no, because...
no, I don't mean in real life, but I mean symbolically, to help launch the narrative forward. Like, he has to... I guess the idea I was thinking was, if the writer gets out of his own way, so to speak, can he tell the tale?
The story.
Yeah.
That's an interesting idea. I had not considered that.
I don't know. I mean, I've only heard that little passage, but that was the thing that hit me. I don't know.
Yeah.
Because keep it in mind.
I'll read the rest
Question
of it.
to get back to. Sorry, now I like totally...
So you are gonna play that song that was inspired
by Patti Smith,
by
Sam Shepard,
and that's a great book too, by the way.
I love that book.
Yeah.
That was another gift from a friend of mine named Scooter in New York, who always gives really good gifts. Uncle Scooter, if you're listening, and
thanks, Uncle Scooter.
Yeah, he's not my uncle, but we call him Uncle Scooter. So he gave me that, and I actually have a signed version, which I didn't realize until after I was done with it. I was like, oh my God, this is actually signed by Patti Smith. That's so rad. So I'm going to just do a quick tuning check because I'm in an air-conditioned space, so...
Y'all folks who are listening and watching the show, say hi in the chat box so we know you're here. Jeb, I think I saw your name flash across. Julianne. So let us know where you are watching from and what platform you're watching on, because we are on Facebook and YouTube.
Yeah, and I'm sorry for the background shouts. I was trying to shut the door because I kept hearing the kids like yelling as they're playing Roblox in the next room. So over FaceTime. You know, they have like a Zoom and they have the game and they're like yelling at one another while they're playing the game together. So it's like modern parenting. It's so strange because I'm not a video games girl. So like, I'm just like, oh, how do you spend all this time? You just want to play games, you know, but luckily she also likes to read. So if I can counterbalance the two, I think we're in good shape. This is the band played on. You ready? Awesome.
Been down all these country roads before. They all lead me right back to your door. Can't believe I'm still stuck in the blue. You ain't been around a year or two, and now I drop in all your favorite dusty bars, looking for your face among the honky-tonk stars. I hear your guitar solo taking flight, center stage and wailing every night. And the band played on, grinding out another heartbreak song. My, it's lonesome when the crowd sings along. You're not there when the band played on. Remembering the way you held your gaze, squinted eye and cowboy mouth, a turn of a phrase. I never met a poet of your kind. I hope that I might sometimes cross your mind. And the band played on, grinding out another heartbreak song. My, it's lonesome when the crowd sings along. You're not there when the band played on. Songs live forever once you set them free. Writers fade away like you and me. But the dreamers are the hardest to pin down. Spend my best years trying, coming off like a clown. Melodies need miles to not go dry. I had to let you go and watch you fly. And the band played on, grinding out another heartbreak song. My, when the band played on. No, you're not there when the band played on. No, you're not there.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. You know, doing this show has just been such a joy. It's like I get to have my favorite songwriters on the show, and they get to talk for me.
Well, and thank you for bringing us to the people who come to hear you. You know, this is a joint effort out here. We all have to kind of band together to let everybody, people who may know me but don't know you, and they're going to get to hear you right now.
Totally. Yeah. I love that use of the word band, actually, that you did just use it. You know, but how true, yes, we do have to band together, which is a totally different idea of, you know, but that song is great, so how can people hear
it is the
cover
last
version?
track on my soon-to-be-released album, Torch and Trouble, which comes out not tomorrow, but a week from tomorrow. And there's also a link. Can I put a link in here? Yeah,
please
there's
do.
a
Yeah, in the
pre-save
comments.
link. But the cool part is after the window that it is, you know, after the album goes live, it'll just be a link to the links, you know, like you can find it here on Spotify, you can find it here.
Right.
You know, this is all like new technology for me. The last time I was dealing with promoting a record, this was not anything that I knew about. So,
I'm with you, sister.
and so it's a learning curve. I think this is it. I'll double check on that, but that should be the link. So if anybody's interested, they can.
And can you say it aloud, since people are on
Oh
different
yes,
platforms,
it's
just in case?
https /ffm.2/Torch and Trouble, one word.
Okay,
Because
great.
Torch and Trouble is the name of the album. It's a mix of like turmoil and torch songs. Or at least
Oh,
we're burning it
awesome.
all down. There's like
Love
multi
that.
layers. Everything I do title wise is either given to me or whatnot, but it's gonna have like several different layers of meaning, or it just gets the nicks on it. By the way, I'm sorry. I'm sitting here like I'm post fire season allergy raw at this point. That's why I've been guzzling down this water. So I'm sorry about that in advance.
Unfortunately, we're not in post yet. Yeah, totally. It's the air.
I
So
know.
for those of you who are not living in California right now, this is a good segue to the song that I'm going to play. We're in fire season again, and Northern California is, if you haven't seen the headlines, really suffering right now with all
Crazy.
A lot.
I know so many people who've been evacuated, especially up north. It's cuckoo.
I see where you put that. Okay, so I'm going to put there.
Oh, that's the private chat. Sorry.
There we go.
I should have put that in the
Pre-save.
comments. I can do that while you're playing.
Pre-save Emily's. Whoops. Emily's.
Oh, I can't post.
Oh.
Oh, there it is. Gotcha.
I didn't do that right. Pre-save. I made that look weird. Let's try that.
Oh, I can see people's comments now. Hi, Shane.
Yeah.
Who are the other people? I saw that Brent was on here too. Hi, Brent.
Yep.
And that's the only people I know on here. So
Yeah.
welcome to all the new people that I don't know. Nice to play for you. Arielle, take us away with a song.
So it's kind of funny because it's crazy hot in here, and I was thinking I've been just all about mellow songs, but I've been reading the headlines and just thought it was a great time to play What Really Matters, which I wrote about the wildfires a couple of years ago, and anyway, I'm just gonna sweat through this song. Hi,
Do it.
Shane. Thanks for
Nothing
being
sexier
here.
than a sweaty woman. That's what a friend of mine told me. So do it.
Well,
Own it.
this is gonna be super sexy. That's funny. It's especially sexy when your fingers slide off the strings. You know what I'm talking about.
We gotta keep it PG here, girl.
What would you take if your world was on fire? Right in the wind on a tinder of leaves. Flames flying in like an enemy fighter. Sunrise in red, tell me what would you grieve? When you're burned down to the bedrock, when you're scraped down to coals, when everything you thought you knew is changing, and you feel the devil fighting for your soul. Flask of whiskey, stash of pot, letters from a lover that you should have long forgot. When your tidal waves of tears turn to laughter, that's when you know it comes down, 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 down to what really matters. What really matters. Smoke strings and daydreams don't help when you're running. Plumes lift to heaven, the rest of your home. Falling like snow, you're an angel in ashes. Chimneys and tree bones and churchyard stones. When it comes down to the bedrock, when everything that you've known is shattered glass in the doorways, and you're wrestling with an angel for control. Flask of whiskey, stash of pot, letters from a lover that you should have long forgot. When your tidal waves of tears turn to laughter, that's when you know it comes down, 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 down to what really matters. What really matters.
I couldn't help myself. I started singing some backgrounds.
I can't hear you. Hold on. All right, here we
I
go.
said I couldn't help myself. I started singing some harmonies on the chorus.
Oh, awesome. I'm so glad you did. My headphones started slipping, so I was like, oh, just
I know. It's like
kick the
it's
whole
always
thing
a
off.
challenge trying to keep them on, because I realized halfway through that I was singing. I can't sing with cans on both ears. Like I tend to get off on my harmony, like my pitch and everything. So like, you know.
I know.
It's funny that you chose that song, because given the passage you read by Tim O'Brien, especially about the lieutenant reading the letters, and there's that line in your chorus about reading, having the love letters that by a lover you long for, or you should have long forgot. And it just made me think of that again. So that was cool.
I was thinking about like the vices that we you know, the indulgences that we have, you know, and actually you're totally right in the things they carried. It's like, it was such an indulgence for him to fantasize and to reread these letters, and then when
fantasy is a great escape.
It totally
and a
is.
comfort zone, you know,
Absolutely.
Especially when you're in so much turmoil as they were, you know,
Exactly.
given the backdrop of Vietnam.
And then yet when Ted Lavender dies, and, you know, in all of our lives, when something big happens that kind of shakes us up, you know, it's a time when we might look at those things that we're sort of leaning on as crutches, and how is it helping, but how is it hindering? And but during the wildfire season, I just, East Coast, I didn't grow up with wildfires, and so.
No, me neither. I did have this crazy experience though as a kid in Western PA. There was a rash of barn burnings, which is a weird thing. Like somebody went around, an arsonist went around southwestern PA when I was probably about 8 or 10 and burned down about, 6 or 7 different barns. And one of them happened to be like 2 houses up the street from my house. And it went up in the middle of the night. And I remember as a kid sitting in the middle of the night up at my bedroom window watching this huge wooden structure that was very close to my house in massive flames. And it's probably the closest I've ever been to with such a big fire, other than Burning Man, which I know you can relate to. It was, and at such a young age, it was terrifying and so attractive at the same time. It was very weird. But it's one of those memories of childhood that's seared into my brain. It probably wasn't as big as I remember it, but, that's how memory works.
I remember seeing a house on fire. This wasn't in second grade, but it was in that area that I had lived in Queens. When I was back there. My grandparents lived there, and I remember seeing a house on fire and was just captivated. It really did sear itself into my mind. And also, thank you so much for mentioning Burning Man, because that memory that I elected to be in crazy heat actually makes this heat a little bit more manageable. So
I was thinking about it the other day too, because I don't know, like walking the dog wants to go out at such stupid times. I mean, my dog is like 16 and he just decides at 5 he needs to go outside. And in the last few days, that could be like 100 degrees where I'm at. And I'm like, you are so dumb. You're a black dog with long hair. Like, what are you doing? But he's like pecking at my,
It's like, gotta go.
Oh, actually, I should show you. I'll take the camera out. I'll give him a little shout out. He's here sleeping on the floor. Can you see him?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, that's him, along with my crazy art there. Not mine, but that's in my studio. But yeah, and I remember walking him around going like, ugh, this is so not fun. But I was like, yeah, I've been here before, usually in like pantaloons and like a corset or something with a red wig on. But, I've been in this heat before, and I always complain about the heat, but it's like, I've done that, and I've been to the desert for, various trips. I had this gig in Joshua Tree a few years back. I was playing at 10 p.m. at the Joshua Tree Saloon, and I just hung out in my hotel room until like 9 p.m. where it went down to 96 degrees. I was like, what do people do who live out here? Like, they just stay inside the whole time.
Yeah, they're just night owls.
Yeah, I guess so. It's a swinging scene in Joshua Tree after 10 p.m. So,
Emily, thank you so much for being my guest on
oh,
this
thank you,
episode.
Arielle, for having me. This was really fun. I love
super fun.
chatting.
This is
I don't get to do much of it these days. So.
In isolation.
Yeah, or they're just different conversations, It's like they're not necessarily my first topic choices. So, thank you.
Yeah, well, thank you. This was a pleasure, and love that song and all the stuff.
Oh, thank you. I love yours too. It was like a nice all-around thematic show.
Yeah, it was. Stick around. We'll say goodbye in the green room, and I will just say goodbye to everybody here. Thank you all for joining today for another episode of Tomes and Tunes. Please go pre-save Emily's new album coming out a week from tomorrow, and follow her on Spotify if you're not already, YouTube, all the places, wherever you like to listen to music. She's rockin', great songwriter, great performer, and all that stuff. See you next week for the next episode of Tomes and Tunes. And who do we have next week coming in? Oh, Kate Klim, you're in for a treat. Love Kate. So see you next time. Bye-bye.